What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name is Jose, and this is a special episode, a Super Bowl recap episode of Super Bowl 57, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm currently recording this just an hour after the game had concluded, where the number one seeded Kansas City Chiefs would defeat the number one seeded Philadelphia Eagles by a score of 38-35. And what I would say was a highly entertaining game, in my opinion. I'll get more on the takes of others around me, like my friends and family's opinions. But first and foremost, I want to say congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs for a wonderfully executed game plan by Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. I'm going to go ahead and give them their flowers. As a diehard San Francisco 49er fan, it pained me to see both the Eagles and the Chiefs competing for a Super Bowl. Preferably, I would have loved to have seen my Niners in there and mix it up and challenge for the Super Bowl for the Lombardi and an opportunity to earn our sixth Lombardi trophy. However, given what happened in the NFC Championship, it just, wasn't meant to be. And that's okay. I've moved past it. I've made peace with it. And I'm not one to ever really dwell on the past and hold grudges and think about what ifs. What happened. We'll move forward from it. And given the situation with what's going on with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, that's a discussion to be have at a later date. Obviously, right now, I wanted to go ahead and open up the episode, of course, with the biggest news in sports, and that is the Super Bowl 57, taking place in Glendale, Arizona, home of the Arizona Cardinals. Like I said, the Kansas City Chiefs win by a score of 38-35, by a field goal kick by Butker. After a controversial call by the officials at that point, a holding penalty was called. And for those already quick to jump onto the bandwagon that the officials cost the Eagles the game, I want to go ahead and open up and first and foremost state that I agree. I think it was a bad call. If I was an official officiating this game, especially the Super Bowl, something that big of this magnitude, I would not have called that. Personally, because yes, was there contact? There was contact. I don't think anybody can disagree that there was contact, but I don't believe it was enough to call for a holding penalty, number one. You'll see as I go into it and recap the game, my overall perspective, because I think that's very important and very crucial to consider, and that is the overall presentation of the game itself. It's really easy and quite often popular to fall into the trap of blaming one play, one single moment on an entire 60 minutes. I personally don't think you can blame 5 seconds in a game for a 60-minute contest. There were mistakes, there were choices made throughout the course of those 4 quarters, 2 halves, 60 minutes, that I believe were crucial in the downfall and quite frankly, the folding of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles came out hot. They scored on their opening possession. Jalen Hurts looked like a man possessed and was running up and down the field on the Kansas City Chiefs. You look at the stat line. Jalen Hurts had 304 yards passing with a touchdown to A.J. Brown, who had 96 yards receiving. And then you look at the ground game. Jalen Hurts, 70 yards rushing for 3 touchdowns. When I say that this man was the offense, I don't think anybody can mistake it for hyperbole. I think he was the engine that ran that team. I think Jalen Hurts is legit. But again, there were some mistakes to be made. I'll get to those shortly. I also have to give Devontae Smith his flowers. 7 receptions for 100 yards. He had a tremendous game and a real impressive catch in the fourth quarter that I believe was for 45 yards and set them up for that last touchdown that would tie the game at 35 apiece. Even Goddard, their tight end, 60 yards and 6 receptions. He made a couple miraculous plays that kept them alive, kept their drives alive, and kept them in the game when they were kind of falling apart. And even then, Jalen Hurts, again, what a guy. The story that has been Jalen Hurts, whether it was from Alabama to Oklahoma, to struggling his rookie season with the Philadelphia Eagles and losing the starting position in a game against Washington in the last game of the season, to now the NFC champion and representative in the Super Bowl. although the story did not end, I'm sure, the way he would have wanted, it's just beginning. I mean, this guy, he has plenty of years ahead of him, just like Patrick Mahomes, who, again, a young quarterback, has his second Super Bowl win in the last 4 years, in his first 5 seasons, that is. Plenty of time for Jalen Hurts to still earn that ring. We look over to the Kansas City Chiefs side of the ball. Travis Kelce, 6 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. Pacheco, their running back, filling in for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, had 76 yards rushing and a touchdown for himself. And Patrick Mahomes, not the greatest game, I will say. He had 44 yards rushing on a bad ankle. We'll get to that in a moment. 182 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. Again, you look at the stats, you look at the numbers, 182 yards passing doesn't really stand out on the box sheet, but those 44 yards rushing were impactful. There were times where you could see he was still gingerly favoring that bad ankle of his from the previous matchup, but I just don't buy it. I think when you're in the game and you're enduring the adrenaline, I'm sure it hurts. I'm sure he's in quite some pain, and I'm sure it is a legitimate injury. But I feel like also the announcers in the meeting were kind of hyping it up more than what it was. Nonetheless, the Kansas City Chiefs, behind Andy Reid, who now has a second Super Bowl win in 4 appearances. Congratulations to him, for sure Hall of Famer, in my opinion. There was a lot of offensive play calling, whether it be through him or Eric Bieniemy, that I thought just was tremendous. There was a couple plays in the red zone where they had their wide receivers wide open on a couple, small routes. Just tremendous. That second half I thought was textbook for Kansas City. But to look again, we got to start from the beginning. In the first half, the Philadelphia Eagles were able to maintain a lead of 24-14, and it really looked like they maintained control. Although they did have a fumble, Jalen Hurts did have a fumble that would turn into a touchdown return by the Kansas City defense. One could argue that score really should be 24-7. But again, given the fumble recovery for a touchdown, the score is 24-14, and that's one dangerous game you have to be playing because you're allowing the Kansas City Chiefs an opportunity to maintain, to still possess a chance in this game, right? Especially given that the Chiefs would receive the ball in the second half. So no lead, and believe me, as a San Francisco fan, no lead is safe against Patrick Mahomes and these Kansas City Chiefs. The Philadelphia Eagles did a wonderful job at time of possession. There was, for the majority of the game, they doubled the time of possession that the Kansas City Chiefs had. The final time of possession, of course, was Philadelphia having it for 36 minutes of the game and Kansas City 24 minutes. Overall plays, the Philadelphia Eagles had 19 more plays than the Kansas City Chiefs had ran, but then really the tail of the tape stops here, and that's the passing game. The Kansas City Chiefs had 182 yards passing to Philadelphia's 302. So surprisingly, they were able to maintain a great level of time of possession throughout the contest, passing the ball. They had a lot of success throwing on the Kansas City defense. But one kryptonite and one, sore spot that the Philadelphia Eagles have struggled with, and something that I wish we would have exploited in our game against them in the NFC Championship, was their run defense. Because the run defense allowed 160 yards running by the Kansas City Chiefs. Whether it was through committee like Mahomes, Pacheco, McKinnon, they found ways to run the ball. And even then, you could see some screen plays being thrown at that defense, and again, exposing the middle of the field and continually to expose their defense. I believe there's a saying, there's a death by 1,000 cuts. So they may not have had these huge plays thrown their way and being exposed for, let's say, a 60-yard touchdown. But these 10 yards, 15 yards, little plays like that, they add up, and it only allows the consistency that Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs were looking for. They played the long game, whereas it's ironic too, because Philadelphia did a real good job of maintaining these long drives that prevented Patrick Mahomes and the offense from taking the field, and it didn't matter. Because at halftime, as I mentioned, it was 24-14. And even amidst a Butker missed field goal and the fumble recovery for a touchdown, a lot of things were kind of making mistakes on both sides of the ball. But a 10-point lead for Philadelphia was not safe. After the Rihanna halftime show, which, by the way, I was a fan of, I did enjoy. I know some people, some of my friends didn't really enjoy. I thought it was really good. I like her music. I thought it was a great show. Congratulations to her and A$AP Rocky for having another baby. Nonetheless, in the second half, Philadelphia took their foot off the gas. And whether it was the fact that they took their foot off the gas or Kansas City just being more experienced and more prepared for this stage, the Kansas City Chiefs actually went on a 21-3 scoring run in that second half. Overall, it was 24-11 by Kansas City that would ultimately end the contest in a 38-35 game. Kansas City, they were patient with it. You could tell they've been there before. They know what it takes, whether it was against the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl 54, or whether it was the adversity they had faced in Super Bowl 55 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which that defense really rocked them that entire game. They never really had a shot. This team was prepared, and I think it really showed in that second half. I think real keys to the Kansas City victory, there's three. Number one, the fumble. In that first half, that fumble recovery, that kept them in the game. I know amidst that, the Philadelphia Eagles, they still were able to maintain the lead. But of course, as I mentioned, no lead is safe against the Kansas City Chiefs. Second, inexperience. The inexperience that you could tell the disparity between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, those guys like that, Frank Clark, they've been there. They know what it takes to win a championship. They won a championship and they've lost a championship. So they have been on both sides of the coin. They know what it feels like to be at the top and at the bottom of that game. The Philadelphia Eagles, yes, they did win a championship 5 years ago, but Nick Sirianni wasn't there. It was Doug Peterson. Jalen Hurts wasn't even in the league. It was Nick Foles. Guys like Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce, yes, they were the anchors. Those guys know. But the real playmakers like an A.J. Brown, like a Devontae Smith, they weren't on the roster. And I'll give credit where credit is due. They had a phenomenal season, worthy of a Super Bowl appearance. But as I mentioned, it is that level of experience and that poise that really can put a team over the top. And I don't think that they possessed that level of poise or that level of experience and urgency that the Kansas City Chiefs expressed and demonstrated in that second half, specifically in that fourth quarter. Because if you remember, the Philadelphia Eagles, as they were trying to tie the game, I personally feel like they were wasting a lot of time. Obviously, you want to waste the clock and you want to kill the clock and make sure you can maintain control of that game. But there was no guaranteeing that they score a touchdown, which granted they did, but there was no guarantee that they score the touchdown, that their defense makes a stop, and they can get the ball back. I thought, and this leads to my final key point that led to the Kansas City victory, and that was time management. And it's funny because in the past, people have criticized Andy Reid for his use of the clock, whether it is calling a timeout, whether it is running a hurry-up offense or slowing the game down. He's usually at the butt of those jokes and being criticized. But it is what won him the game, because the clock management by Philadelphia was a double-edged sword. Because although in the first half, again, they slowed the game down at their pace, they maintained control. They did not allow the Kansas City offense to take the field. Yet in the second half, you could see the errors being made. I mean, there was a few delay of game penalties against them that backed them up 5 yards. That was now leading to, instead of 3rd and shorts, it was now 3rd and 14. And some of them they did convert. But now you're exerting more energy, more play calling than you need to. So it is those delay of games. And not only that, because they had to call timeouts to avoid delay of games. So now you're using ill-advised timeouts, which we know Nick Sirianni doesn't like to do often. He'd rather hold onto those timeouts in crucial times, like in the 2-minute warning when Kansas City marched down for a field goal. You would want to preserve some time on the clock. That way you can have an opportunity for a rebuttal and perhaps a game-tying field goal of your own. But it's mistakes like that that really exposed this Philadelphia team. Now, I don't think by any means they're done. I personally think they're going to be contending next year as well. I think they have the roster for it, and I know they have a lot of free agents coming in next offseason, or this offseason, I should say. But I just think they're a well-run organization by Howie Roseman and company. That them, I think San Francisco, of course, is going to be in the runnings for the NFC's elite. But again, this game to me just really highlighted the experience that Kansas City had, and the poise and the swagger and the confidence that they had in themselves. You saw Travis Kelce in the post-game interviews and the Lombardi Trophy presentation. He kept saying no one believed in them, no one picked them to win the Super Bowl. I mean, let's be honest. There were some that did. But a lot of folks did doubt the Kansas City Chiefs because of the loss of, Tyreek Hill. People were saying, oh, it's a rebuilding year. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a rebuilding year personally. But I'll speak from my own. I did pick the Chargers to win the division. I thought the Kansas City Chiefs would take a step back and not be on the level that they've been, these last few seasons contending for championships, and that was not the case. And I'll be the first one to say I was wrong because I picked the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game. You can ask any one of my friends and my family. I had predicted a Philadelphia Eagle victory, and I was wrong. And I could tell in the third quarter that, okay, it's now, swaying in the favor of the Kansas City Chiefs, because I think any sport, whether it is basketball, football, baseball, even boxing, sports is all about momentum. And I'm a firm believer in that it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And Kansas City, although they had a shaky start, the adjustments that they were able to make at halftime and just really having the ability to adapt to what Philadelphia was presenting towards them really was a highlight for me. Anyone that knows me knows and understands that I'm not a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs nor Patrick Mahomes, but I really think this game opened up my eyes. And I'm just a fan of the sport, a fan of the NFL, a fan of competition. And I got to give credit where it's due, man. They played a hell of a game. Offensively, just tremendous. The Philadelphia could not keep up with them in the second half. And defensively as well, in the second half, they were able to, I wouldn't say limit the Philadelphia Eagles, but they were able to present more adversity and more difficult coverages that really disguised themselves and limited of the points they were able to put on the board. And again, I got to go back to experience. And Andy Reid, off of a bye week, hey, you look at the numbers, he has a really good track record on a bye week against an opponent. You give him enough time to prepare and ample enough footage and tape to cover. Andy Reid is unlike anyone. I'll give him his flowers. I'll give him his credit. Unlike other people that I know, and for those that are close to me, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Even though he doesn't listen to the show, you got to give credit where it's due. And we're in an era now where Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, they have 2 Super Bowls together, and that's something to certainly celebrate. You might not like it, but you could be in the midst of another dynasty. And one thing I will say, I respect the fact that in the post-game interview, Patrick Mahomes responded saying, this isn't a dynasty. We don't want to say that. Because it's 2 championships. I think 3 is the magic number. You want a dynasty, 3 titles. So that gives them something to shoot for. I'm not rooting for them. I will be the first one to say that. I'm not rooting for them. But if they continue to win, hey, you got to give the devil his due, right? Once again, congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs and to the Philadelphia Eagles as well for making it to the Super Bowl, especially in Nick Sirianni's second year and Jalen Hurts' third year, I believe. A hell of a game. I was a real big fan of it. Competitive. It wasn't boring. It was back and forth. You saw a couple good defensive plays on each side of the ball, or on each opposing team, I should say. But as well as offensively, you had everything. Points being scored, a turnover for a touchdown, a good halftime show, and 2 of the brightest young up-and-coming stars, or at least one, because I think Patrick Mahomes has solidified himself as one of the faces of the league. But 2 young, great quarterbacks who I do expect to see on this stage again soon. Whether it's against each other or not, I do predict that Jalen Hurts, this isn't his last time. And as for Patrick Mahomes, let's be real. It's probably not his last time either. Because where there's a will, there's a way. And I think, just as I said before the game, if they have Mahomes, they still have a chance. So once again, finally, congratulations to the 2022 Kansas City Chiefs for winning their 2nd Super Bowl in 4 years and their 3rd Super Bowl in franchise history. Of course, I'd be remiss if I did not talk about the NBA. This last week, I wasn't able to upload an episode or publish an episode on my usual Fridays. I was fighting the flu. I felt like complete garbage, honestly. I couldn't get out of bed and I just needed a lot of rest. And thankfully, it was nothing too serious, just a common cold. Usually around this time of the year, I usually come down with a cold. Thankfully, we're feeling all better. You might still hear it in my voice. I think I still hear it, but I mean, for others who have heard me spoke about it. But the NBA, the trade deadline had occurred this past week. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's been a few names in new places. First, the biggest domino, well, I shouldn't say the biggest, but first, one of the bigger dominoes that fell was Kyrie Irving, who had requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. And he was actually granted that trade in pretty quick fashion. And he's now a Dallas Maverick. He, alongside Luka Doncic, will now be competing in the Western Conference for an opportunity to compete for an NBA championship. Now, personally, I'm a fan of Kyrie Irving, the ball player, right? But obviously, given Kyrie's history off the court and his choice in activities and choice of words, everyone's entitled to their opinion and everyone's entitled to do what they feel is right. But given that baggage, I don't know how it's going to go. I'm wishing for the best for everyone in the NBA, especially because the Golden State Warriors are kind of in a rut again. Just when we were able to regain our groove and kind of establish a sense of momentum, Stephen Curry goes out with another leg injury. He'll be out for an extended amount of time, causing him to miss the All-Star game and some more time. So is there still a chance for the Golden State Warriors to make the playoffs? Yes, absolutely. But it's probably going to be through the play-in. And that's a position I do not want to be in because it's just causing for more games to be played. And I'd rather just make the playoffs as is. But I've already accepted the fact that, hey, if we're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be an uphill battle. It won't be easy. So back to the Dallas Mavericks, though. I don't think it's going to work long term. Now, they might be enjoying themselves now. I know in the past game they had scored 55 points as a collective duo. But I don't think it's going to work in the long run because these are two ball-dominant players, right? Luka Doncic doesn't really operate without the ball. It's in his hand. He likes to call ISOs, not unlike a Kyrie Irving. Now, alone, solo, these two have proven to be high-caliber players. But sometimes just because you're a high-caliber player, that doesn't mean it's going to work well with another high-caliber player. Just look at Brooklyn's Big Three. Do I wish them success? Absolutely. I have nothing against Kyrie. I have nothing against Luka Doncic. Personally, I don't see it work long term. And on top of that, Kyrie Irving, his contract is expiring this coming off season. So who's to say he doesn't pick up his things and move out of Dallas, just like he moved out of Brooklyn, just like he moved out of Boston, Cleveland. You've heard the story before. Aside from Kyrie Irving, we could talk about his former teammate, Brooklyn, Kevin Durant, who is now a former Brooklyn Net, but a current Phoenix Sun. That's right, a Phoenix Sun. They now have the talents of DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and now Kevin Durant. And I'm really amazed that they were able to maintain that core three of Chris Paul, Booker, and Ayton, while also welcoming the talents of a Kevin Durant. Now, unfortunately, they had to give up Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson in a trade to Brooklyn, which is never an easy thing, especially with two guys who have really established themselves as homegrown talent for the Phoenix roster. And I myself am a fan of Mikal Bridges. He's their Iron Man. Hasn't missed a game. Is one of their best defenders and most reliable players on the team. But that's the price you have to pay when you want to, include the talents of a Kevin Durant. Now, as soon as, let me take you back first. It was about 11 o'clock at night, right? And I'm telling everyone good night. I'm going to lay down for the night, whatever, right? I'm laying in my bed, again, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm doing one last scan over my phone, whatever. I like to check Twitter because you never know. I might watch some funny videos like on TikTok or YouTube, whatever, just to pass the time until I get a little bit more sleepy. And I come across this tweet by Adrian Wojnarowski, and it says Kevin Durant to Phoenix, and I'm thinking it's a parody account. There's no way. And then Bleacher Report and ESPN, they start tweeting, and I'm like, dude, he's with Phoenix. So I hop out of bed. Keep in mind, I'm still sick. I'm like half dying in my bed. nearly tripped over my own shoes on my way outside of my room. And I run to the living room to tell my dad. I said, "Did you hear?" He says, "Hear what?" And I just show him a picture of Kevin Durant, photoshopped, of course, in a Phoenix Suns jersey. And it's funny because we had just spoken about that possibility about a day or two prior. Because now that Kyrie Irving was out, I thought, well, there's a chance that they move Kevin Durant. They just might start rebuilding again. What the hell? But nonetheless, Kevin Durant now at Phoenix Sun, that opens them up personally as the favorite in the Western Conference, alongside Denver, which I do think will be our Western Conference championship, in this coming playoffs. But the more I got to think about it, I thought, man, it's just too good to be true to have a guy like CP3, who, by the way, is the first traditional point guard Kevin Durant has played with in a long time, because he had a guy like Russell Westbrook, Stephen Curry, and Kyrie Irving. So now you're going to have a facilitator who's going to be able to dish the ball to a shooting guard like a Devin Booker, to a center like DeAndre Ayton, and to an all-time NBA talent like Kevin Durant. But again, I just feel like it's too good to be true. I don't know if it's going to work. And you look at the health. Devin Booker had been out for a while. CP3 out for a while. DeAndre Ayton isn't as consistent as we would like him to be. Although he had a great showing in last year's playoffs and the year before against the Bucks, can he maintain that level of consistency? And as you know, Kevin Durant already struggling with injuries. He too, along with Stephen Curry, will be missing All-Star Weekend. Again, I wish them the best because I'm the kind of guy who loves basketball when it's at its peak, and the best of the best are playing at their best. So I wish them all the best. And of course that sounds redundant, saying the best so many times. But that Phoenix Suns move, I think, is just so... It's a big splash because you don't really see them making a lot of moves, whether it's the Arizona Cardinals or the Phoenix Suns. Arizona doesn't really make those big, drastic changes to their rosters. So on one hand, I'm a little upset he's coming to the West because that makes the West way more crowded and more competitive with guys like Denver. You have Memphis, New Orleans, when, of course, Zion comes back, who actually suffered another setback, re-aggravating his injury, which will cause him to miss more time. And again, missing the All-Star Weekend, so there's going to be already replacements on the way. But it's very top-heavy. Very top-heavy. And other news in the West, I don't know if you heard, but we have a new all-time leader in NBA scoring. LeBron James finally breaks the 39-year-old record that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was able to set back in 1984. And he is now the new all-time leading scorer in NBA history. A big congratulations to LeBron James. I know, as a Golden State Warrior fan, having to compete against him in the NBA Finals 4 straight years, although the last two weren't as competitive, it was still LeBron James. And I believe if you have LeBron, you have a chance, just like I said with Mahomes. And a big congratulations to LeBron James. And I'm fortunate enough to have been able to watch him play from his first stint in Cleveland to leaving to Miami, going back to Cleveland, and now with LA. So I can't think of a better ambassador or a better person to represent the NBA. And again, couldn't be more deserving of everything that's coming his way. And LeBron James, once again, congratulations. I know we give you a lot of flack, and we like to, joke around about your career and joke about your hairline for sure. But who am I to talk? I don't even have hair. But again, big congratulations to LeBron James on that scoring title. That has been the week in sports, really. Leading up to the Super Bowl, LeBron James breaks the scoring record, NBA trading deadline. Of course, me coming down with the flu, so I wasn't really able to be as active as I wanted to be. But now that it's all over, I think we're going to now focus on the NBA. Of course, as I keep mentioning, All-Star Weekend's coming up. One of my favorite times of the year as a sports fan, because you get to see a lot of the celebrities come out. You get to see the best of the NBA, with the exception of those that are injured, come out and compete in things like the skills challenge, the three-point challenge, the slam dunk competition, even the Rising Stars challenge, because you get to see the stars of tomorrow, today, which I think is always a great opportunity to see the NBA's young stars. And now with the NFL concluding its season, we look forward to the NFL offseason, see what kind of trades, see what kind of free agents sign in new locations. I know that the New Orleans Saints are interested in Derek Carr if he were to be available, now that he's going to be leaving the Las Vegas Raiders. I read somewhere that Tampa Bay is interested in Jimmy Garoppolo as they now move forward in a post-Tom Brady future. And, of course, moving forward with the Niners and seeing how we're able to retool now that we're losing our personnel and our staff to the Houston Texans because D'Amico Ryans has signed a 6-year deal as their newest head coach. But again, that is a time for another conversation at another later date. And in that case, what do you do, right? We have the NBA, and that's the biggest thing. NBA at this moment is now going to be turning up and having, the foot on the gas as we get ready for the second half of the NBA season, preparing for the NBA playoffs. And in due time, I do anticipate watching more of the USFL, even the XFL, because it is football. Although it is not the NFL, it is still football. You better believe I'm going to be watching it and keeping up with it. I'll also be giving my thoughts on some of the movies that are going to be coming out. For example, this coming Friday, the family and I, we're going to be watching the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania movie. We're big fans of Marvel, so I'm looking really forward to that and seeing what they're able to produce, since Wakanda Forever and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness were two of my favorite movies this previous year, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy coming out in May. I'll probably be giving out my take and my opinions on those. Of course, spoiler free to begin with, but then who knows? We'll always put a disclaimer. But until then, this has been another episode of the J Area Podcast. I'd like to thank you guys again for joining us and talking sports and just talking out and just hanging out, man. As we bring this episode to a close, of course, I always want to give you guys major thanks for listening and continue to support the podcast. You can always find me on other social media platforms at justjose_3. Please follow the podcast on Spotify, or even subscribe to the YouTube channel, J Area Podcast, where you can find each of these episodes of the show. Once again, thank you for dropping by and hanging out with us. And if you enjoyed these episodes, please be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Jose. This has been the J Area Podcast, and we will see you again soon.